for joining us. Today's topic is about working with family. So I have here with me my business partner, which is my dad. My dad and I started working together about 4 years ago. This October will be the 4th-year anniversary of the first home we purchased to renovate and then resell, or to flip, as everyone likes to call it these days. So we decided to partner together, and we'll go into that a little bit further, the reasons why we decided to partner together. But before we start talking about working with family, we want to just address when you are working with people that you know, whether it be your friends or your family, it's always important to remember this one saying that I heard, which is all weddings are similar, but every marriage is different. So a lot of times people like to ask us specifically, how exactly is your partnership made up? And it's important to remember that we are just an example of one form of partnership that you can have when working with family, but that doesn't mean that we have the special recipe that's going to work for everyone. Everyone is different. We're going to dive into that a little bit deeper. So before we do, I just want to introduce my dad again. My dad has over 45 years of experience in general contracting. He had his own business. He's worked on everything from Section 8 to multi-million-dollar houses to commercial. I mean, he's really done it all. And I'm very lucky, not only that he's my father, but also too that he has the experience that he has to make this business so successful. So thanks for joining me, Dad.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. And hello, everybody.
So the first question that I want to ask you, Dad, is what were your initial thoughts when I approached you about partnering to start this flipping business that we have?
My initial thoughts were I was a lot of excitement. It was something that I had wanted to do for a long time. I was currently in my construction business doing it for other people, and it was something that I really enjoyed doing and wanted to do, but didn't know how to get started doing it, didn't know how to raise the capital, didn't know how to do the funding. So when Ashley came to me proposing the idea, I was very excited.
So it's interesting that my dad said that he has wanted to do this for a while, because it's funny. So for my entire life, I have seen what my dad does and seen him work with different partners, but I actually didn't know that he wanted to do this. So this is the first time I'm hearing of it. So it's just interesting because you never know unless you ask, I guess, is a lesson learned there when talking with other people, because they might seem perfectly content. I thought my dad was very happy with the current business model he had, but now hearing that he actually wanted to do this before I asked him, that's news to me. So I'm really glad I figured that out on my own, did a little detective work. So I know in the beginning that when I asked you, I know you were really excited about it. One of the things, as someone who has a lot of experience, meaning also that's another way of saying too that you physically have done the work for years, decades even, and you needed a physical break from doing all the work. Is that safe to say that you needed to transition in more kind of an oversight role, and this would provide that opportunity because you could have the expertise that you have and basically utilize those that knowledge in a different capacity?
Yes. When I first started my business, I was very much hands-on, and then I started to grow and became more in a management position. We went through a few changes. The economy changes generally every 10 years in the real estate business or in the construction business, and I went through a lot of ups and downs, and I found through going through those that I really like being hands-on more than being in management position. But so I gauged my business being doing the physical work and being there all the time, kind of control freak, and it helped me keep things in control. but I am getting up in age, and it's the body's not what it used to be, and it's now I'm much more interested in management and less physical work.
So a lot of times we get questions on who can you partner with, and people don't know how to evaluate numbers in terms of what it costs to renovate properties. We also get questions on how do you learn quickly how to renovate these houses? Should I partner with a general contractor? Should I partner with someone who is an inspector because they have a good read on the costs that it takes to repair these homes? This is a perfect example of someone who was very knowledgeable within this space already, and they were looking for a transition out of doing the physical part of the work. So, age is just a number.
True.
And, don't discount someone who has been within this field for decades, because they could be your greatest asset and they could potentially be looking for a transition as well. So I know this is about working with family, but just some tips too along the way on who you should look for as well. So getting back to working with family, I know that there was a lot of excitement when we bought our first house and we were working on our first project. We have so many stories about that first house. We could probably write a book on it just alone on that one house we did together, because we took on a lot of the work ourselves, which when you first start off is a good idea, but over the long term, it's not scalable to be working in your project, physically doing the work. But when we sold the house, we both had different reactions to the sale and the profit of the house. So do you want to speak about that and speak about how that affected our relationship too, because we are family, and we both saw the sale from two different lenses?
Yes, at the time, I was still working in my contracting business. I hadn't given it up, and so I had income coming from other places. When we made a good profit on the first house, I thought it was a good profit. What I learned was that time is very important in flipping houses. Every day that you own a house, you're losing money, and you need to do them quickly. And I was doing a lot of the work myself, and it was one of our longest renovations up until one recently. It was 6 or 8 months of renovations, where now most of our houses are 2 or 3 months. And when you're paying taxes and insurances and interest on the money, your profit gets eaten up rather quickly. So Ashley was seeing it from one side that we got to do this a little more efficiently, and I was looking at it like, well, we did pretty well, but it was over a long period of time.
I mean, let's be perfectly honest. The conversation went a little bit different than that. The conversation was, my dad was super excited that we made this 5-figure profit, and we can disclose that we made a little over $60,000 on our first house. So that came across as that's great. That our first project, to be honest with you, it was the first house we offered on, and we got it. So we were a little nervous. We were like, maybe we offered too high, and then we ended up making this 5-figure profit. But if you look from close to close, it took us a year to turn that house. And for us, and the way that we're splitting the profits, that wasn't sustainable. We can't live off of that income alone. And I was looking at this as, how can we create a business that business will be our sole source of income to start, that we could give up our 9 to 5 jobs. My dad said earlier that he had another job supplementing this income, but I didn't want another job supplementing this income. I wanted this as our sole income. So my dad was really excited, because here we made this great profit, and the other partners he had been partnering with and renovating houses, they hadn't made that large of a profit. But when you extrapolate that over a year, because if you're talking acquisition to close, we actually took a year from purchase, renovation, holding while selling, and then the actual close, to me, that wasn't a sustainable business model. So my dad threatened to quit, not once, but a couple times.
Few times.
He was very upset at how I was looking at this. But I have more of a business training background, and my dad has more of working in the business. So that gets to one of the points that you should look for when working with family. So I want to just stop here with the questions and kind of highlight this point. When you are looking to work with family, you need to be very careful that you aren't overlapping on your skill sets. So this is a perfect case, an example where my dad and I do not have the same backgrounds, which is crazy because we're father-daughter, but we have two different backgrounds, and those backgrounds lend us to look at the same situation differently. That is something that is extremely valuable in business. You need to make sure that you have like a yin and a yang and balance in the business, so you aren't looking at things one-sided. Because if I had looked at the business just from my dad's side, we still would be probably working two jobs. We would quite possibly not be working only on the flipping business. Alternatively, if I had looked at it, or my dad had looked at it just from my side, we might be putting unrealistic expectations on, because I didn't have the experience of how long projects take and how much money it takes to get a project done. And I would have created, my dad and I, if we looked at it through just my vantage point, we would create unrealistic expectations and unrealistic, which is inclusive of unrealistic timelines and unrealistic budgets. And our business could fail because of that as well. So it's really the balance between the two that has been able to yield success for us personally. So we actually, going off of the idea of that we've had some success with the business, we were able to grow the business, and we actually just hired my brother, so my dad's son, TJ, last August, which it'll be a year in a couple weeks, which is crazy to think. Yeah. But we actually went through several weeks of deciding whether or not we wanted to bring on TJ, my brother, and my dad's son. So do you want to talk a little bit about, the discussions we had and just making sure, that it was a good fit for the business, and that was the path we wanted to go down?
Yes. Well, I've known my son and daughter their whole lives, and I love them both dearly, but they're very different, and they're very strong-willed people. The whole family is, we're a bunch of alpha people, and my main concern was keeping the family together and keeping my son and my daughter from killing each other, basically. So I really wanted to bring her brother into the business because he's worked with me his whole life. He's very good in that he wasn't working in it at the time. I kind of hoped that he would get into other parts of business, find his own way. And he was doing that, but this became very lucrative, and he was very qualified. So one of the things, the criteria that I had insisted upon was that I would be the go-between between the two of them. That Ashton and I at times could go at each other pretty hard. Sometimes the businesses, particularly when you push yourself to meet a deadline and you're getting close to that deadline and you're working 14-hour days, 7 days a week, it can get a little heated. And I wanted to make sure that I was a buffer between her and him, and then times like that, so that we didn't have a complete meltdown.
So this brings us to our next point in terms of working with family, which is making sure that there's systems in place that are very specific on who gets the final decision moving forward. Because there are a lot of points in the business where you need to make decisions. And if there are three chefs in the kitchen, it's very hard to come up with a plan moving forward, especially even though we're family. Getting back to the idea that we're all family, we work together, we all have different backgrounds and we all have different perspectives. So my brother's perspective, like my dad mentioned earlier, was he grew up working for my dad. So his construction knowledge experience was right there. After he graduated from college, he actually went into corporate and became a very successful manager. And therefore, he had a project management background skill set that was a perfect combination of something that we were looking for and in expanding the business. So when we were looking for another project manager to come on, it was really a no-brainer to hire my brother, except for the fact that it added another complexity with the family dynamic, because there are a lot of things that could potentially go wrong, and we didn't want that to impact our family relationship. Furthermore, you now have a lot of people within the same family relying on the same source of income. So that is another challenge that we talked through and made sure that we were all in agreement of this. Fortunately, we all at the time had spouses that were not within the real estate realm. So if anything were to go wrong, there was another source of income coming into that couple per se. But it's still important to realize that we now monopolize all of our family get-togethers from Mother's Day, which my mom will be the first one to tell you she was ready to kill all of us because during Mother's Day dinner, instead of talking about whatever my mom wanted to talk about, we were negotiating the sale of one of our houses. So my mom wasn't too happy about that, but that's one of those things that, it's the nature of the business. And fortunately, we all have spouses that are very supportive of us
Absolutely.
and the business. So the next thing I wanted to cover is making sure that we talk about turning on and turning off the business. So we just talked about it a little bit with the Mother's Day example. But one of the things that can be challenging when working with family is that every single time that we get together, it typically turns back to work. So we now have so much to talk about with this shared connection of what's going on with work, and it's just a natural transition. So do you want to talk about some of the times that we've had to basically pump the brakes and put up walls to say we should not be talking about work right now? Like let's
Well, I think one of the things is it's a testament to how much we enjoy what we're doing, because we really enjoy talking about it. It's not like work when we're together and we're discussing it. It's full of excitement. We enjoy it, but we have to also concentrate on the rest of our lives, and I have two beautiful granddaughters, and I love spending time with them, and my wife and loves spending time with them and doing other things. And it's it does creep in, but you have to concentrate on other things. We went down to the shore recently and had a lot of good family time. We dropped our granddaughter in the ocean, and but that's a story for another time. But yeah, it's difficult sometimes to turn it off, but you have to do it.
So one of the things that we were just talking about earlier was making sure that there isn't redundancy. So one of the things that we talked about with my brother, where there's a difference, and I think this is a really important thing to note. There's a difference between making sure you have depth within your business versus creating redundancy within your business. So we needed depth. We didn't need redundancy. We needed more support to manage the projects that we had. So we were looking for someone who had construction experience like my dad. We didn't need someone to mirror my dad and be an exact carbon copy because my dad could provide that oversight. We focus normally on older homes. We do full gut rehab. So we need someone extremely knowledgeable about complicated renovations. My dad can provide that information. So we didn't need someone at the same skill set. And I'm not trying to say that my brother is not extremely good at what he does. He is very good at what he does. But what I'm saying is we didn't need to look for someone with 45 years of experience who had their own business, that kind of level. We needed someone with construction knowledge, which my brother had, 20 years of construction knowledge. But we also needed someone who was really good at project management. We really needed someone to hit the ground running. We needed someone who was able to organize schedules. We needed someone who was self-sufficient, took good direction. We needed someone that we knew could work with us really well, and that was my brother. So he provided the depth we needed for the business to take the next step, but he didn't create redundancy in the fact that he didn't mirror my dad. Just to be perfectly honest, and I think my dad will agree, I think my dad has learned some ways to become more efficient with respect to project management because my brother had more experience on the project management side than my dad did. So do you want to talk about maybe some examples there?
Yeah, organization is not one of my strong suits. I'm organized on the job, and I know I do it kind of by feel, but he is very organized and methodical, and has experience in management outside of construction, and so does my daughter Ashley. And I've learned a lot from both of them, how to become better organized, and being more productive, being better organized. It was actually one of my goals that we go over our goals once a quarter about what we want to accomplish, and that was one of mine.
And he's doing a great job too. So the next thing that I want to talk about is going one step further when speaking about depth versus redundancy, is talking about what skill sets make a business successful. So I'm sure everyone has already heard the theory about working on your business versus in your business. It's really important that the people that make up your business, whether it be family or non-family members, friends, whoever, that there is a balance between people who are working on your business and in your business. If you have people that are only working in your business, you will always be running the rat race, whether you're working in real estate or any other field. I'm sure Robert Kiyosaki would agree with me on this one, that if you're constantly working in your business, you will never see the bigger picture and be able to grow to the next level. But if you have people who are working on the business, you can have that vision. You can go to the next level. So I think we have a good balance because there are aspects of the business where you are definitely working in the business, the day-to-day, the managing of the houses. And there are aspects of the business where I'm working in the business. So I'm doing the accounting and doing ordering of materials and the design and things, and managing our website and social media content. That would be in the business. But then when we look for a broader picture, what steps are we taking next? How many houses do we want to do? Do we want to grow? Do we want to stay the same size that we want to do? What kind of numbers are we looking for? Those are things that are more working on the business. And that's something that I try to prioritize, because that way we have a balance of someone who's working on the business and in the business. So those are just some examples of how you need to ensure that regardless of working with family or not, you need to make sure that you have those two issues covered. And then finally, before we open it up for questions, I want to talk a little bit about structure. We get this question a lot, which is, it's got to be, if not the most common question we get, it's definitely top 2 question we get, which is, how do I structure a partnership or a business with my family? So I think that it's very clear that we've emphasized the importance of not creating redundancy. So what is important? So let's look at the basics. The basics of working with family. The first question you should ask yourself is, would I work with this person if they were not family? If the answer to that is no, then just turn off this. Turn off the live stream, go do something else, go find another partner that the answer is yes to, because that is the first question you should be asking yourself. And I have been asked that question on a lot of different panels that I've spoken on, and you can see a lot of people just like roll their eyes and shake their head like, absolutely no way would I work with this person if they weren't family. So I think you have to be honest with yourself about that, because inevitably that is going to come up. Whatever problems you have with family members are going to be magnified when you work with the person. So it's really important that you are honest with yourself on that first question. When you're asking yourself whether or not you would work with that person if they weren't family, most of the time people think of that as just sort of like the disposition of the person. Do I get along with the person? But you want to take that one step further and ask yourself, does this person have the qualifications that I need and the business needs to be successful? So working together, are we going to work together successfully? The great thing about my dad and I is we have completely opposite qualifications. I'm fortunate that my dad has spent the time to educate me on a lot of things that he knows, but I will never know as much as my dad knows about renovation. And I don't want to know as much about renovation as my dad knows, because he is excellent at that. And then my brother also is excellent at that as well. So my goal is to provide support for them in all other capacities where I feel that I have a little bit more expertise in handling the analysis of finding the houses, things like that, so they can be experts in their field and I can be experts in my field.
I also think another important attribute is work ethic. If you don't feel that the other people are putting as much into it as you are, there's going to be resentment and it's not going to work. And I know that everybody in this family has the same work ethic and they put 100% into everything that they do.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think work ethic and commitment are huge, just huge qualifications that you want in someone. You want someone who is, even if they don't want to, but willing to give up a weekend if they have to get a job done. And I know, I would bet my life on it that all three of us would do that. We would do that for each other. If any of us called each other and said, I need you over here right now, I need help with this, I know that anyone would drop in a second to do whatever they were doing, drop whatever they were doing to go help each other out. And that's really important. So next is obviously going off of that is drive, making sure you have the same drive, work ethic. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. You're stealing my notes here.
I didn't read them.
And then finally is trust, which is really important. I mean, most people have trust with their family, so you don't really think about it that much, but you are dealing with a lot of sensitive information. You're dealing with finances and paying of contractors and all those types of things. And if you don't trust your family member for some reason or another, and if you're always looking over their back, that really is not going to be cut out for a good relationship, a business relationship. So make sure that you really are honest with yourself when you ask these questions and vice versa. And then once you get to structuring, it really comes down to what skill sets do you each provide to the table. Are you both providing equal contributions to the business? And there are so many debates. You can go in the BiggerPockets forums. You can ask people at two different people at the same local real estate meetup, and you'll get two completely different answers. But for us personally, we feel that we're contributing equally to the business. So therefore, when we initially structured our business, we decided to do an equal partnership. So we're 50-50. we decided to do that. That is something that you may not agree with. But like we said in the beginning, that all weddings are similar, but every marriage is different. So this is the way that we have set it up, and I feel comfortable with how we're set up. And
I think it works very well.
all right, you better agree.
Yeah, we both have an equal amount invested in the company, and we have as much to gain and as much to lose.
So with that, we are going to open it up for some questions. So let's see what we have here. If you want to start posting your questions. Hi, Andressa. Thanks for watching. Colorado Springs. I saw someone earlier from Spain while we were talking. So if you want to start posting any questions, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Let's see.
Georgia,
Texas, Ontario, Canada. Another Canadian. Spain, Alberta. Wow. So we have a lot of people. Anthony Johnson. Sorry, what is STR? If you could clarify what that is. I don't know. We'll see. Let's see. South Carolina. Please share how you deal with conflict or disagreement so that it doesn't affect your relationship. Okay. So, do you want to tackle that, or do you want me to tackle that?
You can tackle that. We did mention I almost quit a couple times.
Every house my dad has quote unquote quit. Okay, how do we handle disagreements? So it depends what we're disagreeing on. There are certain things that we're each responsible for. So, for example, when it comes to design, like for example, the last house we had,
Which one's
the
last one?
Birch house.
Okay.
So we had this house, and my brother was leading the project, and
His first project.
His first project, he did an excellent job.
Our most profitable.
Our most profitable project was led by my brother as his first project. So hats off to TJ, and also hats off to my dad for training him, because I mean, wouldn't you want your a new employee to come in, lead their first project, and have it be the most profitable for the business? I mean, I think that's a good testament to the quality of training that my dad did. So let's get back to the question. The question is regarding how do we handle conflict. So I'll give you a minor example. So the one example that we had this weird staircase situation, and it was an older home. It was from 1909, and the staircase where the spindles went up was extremely wide, and there was a piece of molding that went up the side of this wide platform. What is it called? Where the spindles go in?
Not the term that isn't coming to me.
Okay, well, anyway, it was this piece of molding, and the molding kind of died off into the middle of a wall. So we were trying to figure out the transition. Well, my dad and I left the project for a couple days, and my brother took it upon himself to figure out how to have this die into the wall. And it looked terrible. It was awful.
Yeah.
So my dad and I came back after a couple of days, and I do some of the design, and so does my dad. So, you know, we're all involved in it. And we got in this whole little dispute over what should happen. And my brother's point of view was, why are we paying to have this redone? It's not that big of a deal. But for me, it was a huge eyesore. My dad, it was a huge eyesore. And ultimately, my dad and I won this argument. But we really kind of talked it through and tried to understand each other's points to see where people were coming from. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that it needs to be aesthetically pleasing. So in that situation, we went with the most aesthetically pleasing design. But there are other situations where we get in very heated arguments, and they typically surround what added things we're going to do to a house and the cost associated with it.
Yeah. We there's I think the biggest problem with disputes is basically pressure related at the end of a project, because there's a lot of pressure on finishing the project, and people are working very hard and their nerves are at their breaking point, and sometimes um, the wrong thing said the wrong way or the right thing said the wrong way can be taken wrong and can create a conflict. But at the end, it all comes down to we all love each other, we all care about each other. So at the end of the day, that is what's important, and the little day-to-day things pale in comparison.
Yeah, I think it's a little interesting to note that actually Kyle, my husband, who's also involved in the business, he's our realtor. He always comments that he finds it crazy that we can be screaming at each other on the phone and then we hang up and we're like, okay, love you, bye. And he thinks it's so funny, but that's one of the things where you really need to have a balance between knowing that your family at the end of the day and knowing that this is one project and 6 months from now, we're probably going to forget, what we even argued about. Like, that house is the only house I can think of that with a recent dispute, because we recently did that. But I know we've had disputes on every other house leading up to that house, and I can't think of one example from those houses because they don't matter anymore. They're just history. There's bigger things. So we're gonna go on to the next question. So the next question is, how do you screen contractors? Do you check their work first before hiring? So,
Well, I think
go ahead.
I think one of the important things is to get a stable of contractors. Being in the business for a long time, I have a lot of contacts. Even so, there's certain contractors that are hard to, we're having trouble keeping. For some reason, we have problems with plumbers and masons. We can't seem to keep them. But really, you got to look for contractors who are dependable, who call you back when you call them, who respond if you text them, they text you back, who are dependable showing up when they said they're going to show up, because your schedule depends a lot on that, and who do really good work. You don't want to have to be worried about what kind of work they do, and finding them. It's sometimes you just have to go by your gut, by how they present themselves. What if they're professional. Referrals by groups like BiggerPockets
and also our own team. So, for example, like going off of what David Green says, which rock stars know rock stars. I mean, how do you find a good drywall guy? You ask your painter, because your painter follows your drywall guy. So if your painter has worked with a really good drywall guy and they've done the seams correctly and they, like spackled and prepped the area really well for you, then it makes the painter's job easier. So really ask the people who come after the trade that you're looking for, because that'll help you identify a few really good people.
And when you find good contractors, try to keep them. I always look at it this way. We're all in this together. We're all there to make money. We're there to make money. They're there to make money. I try to make the job easier for them, be prepared that the job is prepared so they can do the work efficiently. But if we don't make money, they don't get hired. If they don't make money, they're not going to be around to work for us. So you want to all try to work together for the same results.
Okay, so the next one is how do you schedule your payments? So, real quickly, we do a flat payment process. We do a 30-30-30-10, which is 30% upfront after first day of work is completed. All paperwork is signed. We have the copy of their insurance, workman's comp. We have a signed contract agreement. And then we do 30% at 50% completion, 30% at 90% completion, and then we do 10% at the end. The reason we do it that way is honestly, it was based off of my dad's recommendation, but the 10% at the end, a lot of times there's inspections at the end, and mechanicals are waiting for another guy to finish his job because inspectors like to bundle their final inspections. So with that, we've paid the majority of their estimate because they've done the majority of the work, and that 10% is just kind of lingering. So we make sure that if the inspector finds anything or if there are any touch-ups or whatever, that we have that as some money left over for reserves so that we can pay them. So moving on, hi Russ, watching from Bay Area, California. Do you think it's possible for a family member to be a silent partner? That's a good question. That really depends on the family member. I mean, if the family member is providing money and they're used to being a passive investor, that is very possible. But it really depends on the person, because you might have someone who says they want to be a silent partner, but because they know you and they interact with you on a more frequent basis, that they are not as silent as you think they should be. Someone commented about the quality. I apologize for that. Unfortunately, live stream is not, I don't think live stream is 100% today because we had a lot of problems when we first started. Oh, Justin, thank you so much for our podcast. So, Rafael Campos, how do you all split fines for projects and splits for projects? I don't know what you mean by fines for projects, but for splits for projects, we actually talked about this earlier when my dad and I first started. We were doing a 50-50 investment in terms of what we were bringing to the table. So we decided to do a 50-50 split. One of the things that, Raphael wrote, how do you split funds, not fines? Okay, funds. Okay, so he wrote later here. So one of the things that we get questioned about a lot is, well, maybe I get questioned a lot. I'm sure people aren't coming up to my dad asking this question, but one question I get asked a lot is, are you only paying your dad 50%? Is he only making 50% because he's your dad, as opposed to if he was a contractor you met, would you pay that person less? In our area, it is very common for a contractor, a project manager, to make 25 to even 35% overhead for the project. If you are a contractor and you are making this kind of money by basically doing the same thing, but you are not pressured by someone saying, do it cheaper and do it faster, who are you going to want to work for? You're probably going to want to work for that person as opposed to someone who flips houses. So to me, the value that having a partnership where we're both, we're both in it together, equally in it together, that means we win as a team, lose as a team. There's more incentive for us both to want to be successful. So that is how we decided to do that. We've said this multiple times, that is not the case for everyone, and we respect everyone's decision on how they want to split it. But for us specifically, just if you want to talk about, even if my dad wasn't my dad, I still think it is very advantageous to be 50-50 partners with a general contractor. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just my personal opinion.
I think that it's very important you have a good relationship with your contractor, and a split that you're both happy with. your general contractor is going to be very key to whether you make a profit or not. Getting the work done properly and quickly makes all the difference between making money and losing money.
So the next question we have is, what's the best way to determine a quick estimate of rehabbing a property? This is a great question, Justin. So for someone who has now rehabbed several houses, we can actually determine a quick estimate because we know the price per square foot that we renovate homes. But not everyone knows that. So let's back up and talk about a newbie, someone who is new to renovating homes. One way to do it, very quick way of estimating a rehab property, is for the first few months before you get started yourself. You can actually every single day go on whatever website, Zillow, Trulia, Redfin, Realtor.com, whatever website you look at, and look at houses that are potential flips. Create a tracker and then track the sale price of that house. Follow that house and then watch for that house to go back on market and see what that house is relisted at. You will not know the exact number that someone made on the profit, but you can walk that house once it goes back on the market. If you walk the house beforehand, you'll be able to determine what they did, what projects they did, and you can start to get numbers. It's really hard though when you first get started to do a quick way of estimating.
Yes.
You really need more experience, but if you partner with someone or you can Google these numbers to see exactly how much, but the more you do, it's a 10,000 hour rule. The more houses you vet, the better you will be at estimating rehab costs, and then you should be able to be very quick at judging how much a rehab costs.
You can Google what does it cost to do a certain project, flooring, concrete, whatever, on the internet. I use this sometimes as a check, or if I'm not familiar with a certain process. And I think it's homewise.com has a calculator where they'll put in, where you put in your zip code and what you want to do, like how many square feet of floor or something like that. And they'll give you parameters for your area, and they're pretty accurate of estimates for each individual thing that you're looking to do.
Great. So we are just going to see if there are any other questions, and if there aren't any more questions, we can actually let you all go. But if you do have questions after this live stream here, please feel free to comment underneath the video, and we'll be sure to answer the comments later on. So I think that might be everything. So thank you everyone for joining. And we look forward to presenting another podcast or live stream next week. So I hope you will join us next week for that one as well. So for now, thank you again, and thank you, Dad, for joining.
Well, thank you. Bye, everybody.